Hi, my name's Hayley Perry, and I'm one of the artists at the Expressive Stitch Collective. And today I wanted to present you with some of my work and tell you a little bit about myself. So when you see the content that we are presenting here, it gives you a little bit of context as to who it's coming from. So it's very nice to meet you, and I'll get going and show you some of my work. So a little about me. I am an abstract painter, and I went to school 2 times for painting, most recently at University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, where I majored in painting. So I've been a painter for about 20 years. And like I said, I studied it in school, and when I was in graduate school, this is the kind of painting I was making, very textural collages. And it's only natural that I would then sort of pursue fiber arts as a career and as my preferred medium later on, because I've always worked in a really textural way. A lot of this is paper and drawing and paint, acrylic paint, oil paint. And I've always been a colorist at heart, very interested in color theory and the use of color and pushing color and the boundaries of color. So along with texture and everything, it sort of, my work is starting to sort of make sense when I put it all together and look at it in a slideshow like this. So I first started rug hooking when I was a child. I'm very lucky to have a few different fiber artists in the family. I am a fourth generation rug hooker, so I learned when I was about 8 to 10 years old, and did do a couple projects back then, but really was less interested in rug hooking as a medium and more interested in drawing. So I used to draw patterns with my mom. We would do rug hooking designs together, and I would draw some of her patterns. She has been rug hooking for about 30 years now. So um, it's something that we've always done together, which is very nice. And in addition to being a fiber artist, she also has started a fiber arts career back then. She doesn't call herself an artist, but we all know she is. She just says that because she doesn't like to draw as much as I do, but she's a fiber artist in her own right and taught me a lot of what I know, including how to hook rugs. The other person in my life who's been really influential is Deanne Fitzpatrick. That is my mom's sister. And Deanne taught my mom how to hook about 30 years ago. So Deanne's been hooking for about the same amount of time. My grandmother hooked, and then my great grandparents hooked, and that's all we know. They come from maritime Canada, so it's very popular craft up there through Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. So it just kind of makes sense that the craft sort of is carrying through us. And when I first started hooking, this is the type of scene that I would make. This is an older design of mine, one of my first. But still very popular. And I had a real divide between my fine art painting work and my rug hooking work. Although similar in palette, I really looked at them as two different things. When I got out of grad school, I started making work like this because, as I said, I have a rug hooking designer in the family. So I thought that, it'd be great for me to carry on that tradition and do rug hooking as my job. So I was making designs and selling them in kits, and I still do. And I still make this work, but I do consider it more commercial work, where my fine art work, which then was just painting, was quite separate. Here's another piece that I made, again, very decorative. Um, and utilitarian. This is a pillow. But my rug hooking work really changed when I started using line as sort of paying attention to line and how line worked in rug hooking. This is an example of that. Um, Really accentuating the line within my work. So I've always been interested in color, always been interested in abstraction, but line is really what I was focusing on in rug hooking for quite a while. Oh, and I have a duplicate slide there. Sorry about that. Let me move on. This is another earlier piece. Again, you can see that the line in the background is really something that I was playing with, starting to play with patterning. But again, really looking at these pieces as commercial ventures, decorative items for your home. There was a time that I started, when I started having narrative creep into my work, even though this isn't the most narrative piece, there was a time when I just started putting objects on background, and I started using line to give a little bit of a story to the rug. So this is all kind of a breakthrough moment for me that the rug hooking is a little bit more than just making decorative items for your home, but you can really use the line as an expression. And I bring up this piece because not only is there a bee on a background, but now using that line gives you this sense that it's bumbling about, that it's moving. So that started to become kind of exciting for me. Here's another piece here, although this is just a leaf on a background, again, another pillow. There is a certain expression to this piece. There's sort of this explosion of color in this leaf. So again, once I started kind of focusing on the capabilities of the medium, and in this case, using the line and using the color, it started to become more exciting and more expressive for me. This piece is actually a little bit older, but again, kind of seeing what I can do with patterning in the background, seeing how movement's created and how you can use patterning to excite the eye. And then here, I'm really starting to tell stories with line. Again, that anchor, the swirling of the rope through it, it's creating movement and then creating the waves with the lines. Also, creating a story between subject matter, in this case, the anchor, and the background. And then here's one. This is a little more of sort of like an impressionistic type technique where everything kind of has this modeled look to it, sort of like a painting. That once I started getting more advanced with my rug hooking, became interesting to me, especially somebody that's used texture in their painting throughout their career. This is an example of a kit. So just having like the objects or the subject matter more embedded into the background and activating that background with lots of patterning and line started to become really important to me. And here's another one just showing sort of the whimsy of the flowers. These are, I call them kite flowers, sort of dancing about. So the rugs, things started happening in them that were becoming more exciting and more satisfying as a maker. But again, still looking at keeping this work separate from sort of my more serious and expressive work as a fine artist. Until about 2016, 2017, when I made this piece. It's really the first piece that I made for myself. And when I kind of had time after building up my career for quite a few years, at this point, it was had Loop by Loop Studio for 4 or 5 years, and I started thinking about how I can use rug hooking to express some of the ideas that I was doing in my fine art work. Now, we talked about like the color and the texture in my work, but my paintings are really about like landscape or place or spaces, like the specificity and the sensory experiences that you have in a certain kind of space. So it was only natural to sort of pick up and make a design that's sort of like a surreal landscape, with those like lollipop kind of figures in there looking like trees and having multiple layers of, you could read them as fields, but they're kind of abstract and surreal. And you can see that here I'm really focusing on the line work, the pattern work, and the inherent qualities of rug hooking and how can I use those to my advantage. From there, I moved on to quite a large piece where I'm really trying to push the boundaries of line and pattern and space. Again, in more of like a landscape format, but a very surreal one. And I'm looking at how, different kinds of patterns, such as like in the middle there, there's a purple and salmon kind of block type pattern that sits flat against, like these pyramid shapes that are supposed to kind of like suggest 3 dimensions, but I'm still playing with flatness. So an awkward piece, I think, but still really like this piece because there's a lot of growth there and there's a lot of experimentation. And even though it reads as kind of like a strange, surreal piece, it really kind of taught me a lot, and there's a lot of sort of risk here. This is the first piece that I made where I'm combining abstract this abstract language that I'm building of patterns and shapes, and then combining that with recognizable subject matter. So up at the top we have these kind of like abstract rings that don't really exist in a sky, but they are the sky here. They're also kind of suggesting space because of this difference in size and shape of them. And then in the foreground, we have those abstract waves that I was making with the lines, and then slightly behind that, you have these hands, which are actually tracings of my hands that are various shades of red. And when you put all these elements together, all these different things that I've been playing with, you actually come up with a story. And if I were to interpret this piece, to me, it looks somewhat panicked, as if the either the hands are sinking or they're reaching up for those rings. But it's not exactly the interpretation I had when I was in my head. I was just putting different things together and playing and seeing what kind of story emerges. But it was very interesting to my work that a narrative began. As I said, I'm an abstract artist. I've always been quite a formalist, meaning just I use color to express myself in abstract elements of design. Here, I'm actually illustrating something, an abstract story, but there's something there that's recognizable. So it gives people an avenue into interpreting my work. This is a bigger piece that I made right after that one. And the hands, again, they're tracings of my own hand. They're a little more peaceful. This story, I would say, is about being a maker and what it is to be a craftsperson. This is also the first rug that I did where I was mixing in some yarn, though it's hard to see because this image is small. There's yarn. The outlines of those hands are yarn. There's like a fuzzy purple yarn kind of in the middle there. But again, I'm still working with the patterning of the wool fabric strips, and the different kinds of textures I can get with wool fabric strips mostly. So my natural progression in story is, if I'm making work about making, now I'm a visual artist, so I'm gonna put eyes into my work. There's also a certain kind of underlying story here about being all seeing, enlightened, with the sunlight, and seeing things for what they are. But there's many different interpretations you can bring to this piece. But I became interested in the idea of adding light, like a landscape type light, into my work, which is not something I've really seen before. It is obviously very capable to create light in rug hooking. We see it all the time in beautifully shaded flowers or scrolls, even some landscapes. But I was interested in more of like an abstract sense of light. So that's what I was doing in this piece, and the sky is really where I put a lot of my energy, it's a mixed material sky, and I like the contrast between the sun, which is mostly fabric strips, against sort of the softness of the sky. Where I was, again, trying to create this sense of light. So materials that are in here are like roving, there's yarn, there's wool fabric strips, there's a little bit of everything, but I really want to create that gradated effect. Here's another one where I was, again, kind of thinking about enlightenment, the eye, sort of like this spiritual enlightenment, you could say. And again, working with those gradated materials, gradated colors of different materials, a lot of yarns and rovings and things. So the theme continues through multiple pieces of eyes and hands. This piece I began, again, another large piece, I began right after I did the piece with the pyramids, and I kind of put it away for a while. And when I took it out during the pandemic, 2020, I redrew the piece to include the hands. And again, it relates back to that piece where I have the red hands and the rings. In that the hands, they stand for two things. Is it somebody being saved, or is it somebody drowning? And I like sort of that dichotomy of those two ideas, and you don't really know which one it is. Um, but again, it speaks to a lot of the feelings that a lot of people had during the pandemic. Here's another one where the hands become a little more alien-like. They become less, not that any of them are realistic, but these ones, they're really exaggerated, reaching up towards the sky. Again, they almost look as if they're part of the landscape. So taking the same element, or not the same element, but similar elements or ideas, and switching the context of them visually can give you a lot of different story ideas. And this one adds in a new element or a new piece of my language, which is the birds, the crows. Again, going back, using that pyramid shape that's shown up in some of my pieces, and also using the modeled sky, this sort of like sunset type sky with that bright orange contrasting with those dark birds. This is sort of around the time we were lifting from the pandemic, so it's really the a rug about community and being around people again. So from there, I started getting a little tired of making large rectangular rugs, and I knew that I wanted to break the rectangular shape, which I did here and there, but not with any, just maybe an arched rug here and there, or a circular rug or something, but really wanted to push shape a bit further. But where was I going to find these shapes? So I started doing small watercolor paintings that are about 2 by 2 inches. And this is something I still do today, just to kind of loosen myself up with either watercolor or gouache, as I draw a bunch of 2 by 2 inch squares or something around that size. And I just start filling them in with colors and shapes. And I took my best ones and I started making rugs from them. And this is where my first shaped pieces came from. And so this one, which is called Arches, it's really only about maybe 20, 12, 13 by 20 inches or so. So these are somewhat small. And and you can see some of the colors and the shapes from those paintings are directly in these. And they're really just small. This one's about 12 by 12 inches. It's called The Pink Place. It's really about just like color, again, and texture, working in a very abstract way. This one is a little more recognizable. It's alluding to some sort of plant life, but again, it's really taken from those paintings. And seeing what I could do with shape. If you're interested at all in how I finished these, there is a video on YouTube all about how I finished these shaped pieces. And so I made a whole bunch of these. I would stretch out a big long foundation on my table, and I'd hook them all at once. These ones are just a little bit bigger, at maybe about 20 by 25 inches. And this is the first one I made that actually has a hole in it. And I started becoming really interested in the negative space around the rug, and within the rug, and how to create that and why to create that. And so what was interesting to me is, as I started working on shaped pieces, the work became less utilitarian, but more object-like. And I was really interested in that because rugs are utilitarian, but you use them on the floor. Once I put them on the wall, they're deemed not usable anymore. They're no longer utilitarian, but in this particular rug, it uses the wall as part of the piece, in that, like, the wall is the negative space. Here's one that I made, kind of combining the total abstraction with recognizable subject matter. This one's called To the Nest. It's a bird. I actually have a quilly sculpture on the bottom, all those kind of like little circles. That's standing wool. And I'm combining materials here. So I'm doing a couple different things here. In this piece, I'm again kind of using recognizable subject matter. If you're not aware, those kind of connections, those three different lines are hands coming together and connecting. And again, becoming interested in that negative space that happens within the rug and the overall shape, but also having the rug sort of relate back to the body. This was the first rug I made in 2023. I was very concerned with sort of like bodies and my own body, midsections, kind of like protection, using the hands as protection. Here's one too that kind of speaks of the rug itself is sort of like a midsection, but of course in an abstract way, since these hands are sort of growing out of the middle. And another thing happened when I started making um, rugs that needed to hang on the wall. I also started becoming interested in gravity. So, like this one called Pressed. If you can't tell, those are all arms that are sort of sandwiched on top of each other, and they're being supported by these columns below it. So, like what happens when things are pressed down, gravity kind of presses on you. This one's called Dropped. So, this is the first one where I started making multiple elements that I would pin up on the wall. So now the rugs are becoming more broken apart and more installation like. In the midst of all this, I also started making more of those quilly sculptures. So these are pieces, they're quilly, so they're standing wool. I take the selvage of my work and I'm rolling them up, and then I'm essentially gluing them together to make these sculptures that kind of sit on the wall. So I know it's hard to tell because these are not three-dimensional, it's a photograph, but these sort of sit on the wall like they're like butterfly wings. So the center is leaning against the wall, and then they kind of the two sides come off the wall. Here's one. This one's a little more flat, but you can get a sense where those two on the right side are sort of coming out, how they're glued together. And here's one where I started combining rug hooking with the quillies. So now my rugs are starting to come off the wall too, because they're using the quillies as they're supporting the quillies, and the quillies are supporting them. And my most recent piece is pretty large. This one is about maybe 36 by 22 inches or so, with those little quillies kind of off on the wall. You can imagine that the white background that I've whited out is the wall, and this is how the piece sits. And this comes off the wall for about 7 or 8 inches. So where that rug hooking meets the quillies, kind of in the lower third of the rug, it's sort of like it's like a vessel that's holding those quillies in there, and all those quillies are laid together about 7 or 8 inches off the wall. So my work is now becoming more sculptural. And I joke that I'm feeling the need to take up more space and playing. Now that I've been working on the wall and working with gravity, I'm playing with this idea of space. So it all started with line and realizing the capabilities that rug hooking had with line, and sort of going through the elements, line and texture and color, where my focus is at one point. Then I, went to shape, and now I'm on to space. And I think that my work will probably continue in this vein of being sculptural, relating to the wall or the environment more. By that I mean like the environment as in the space it inhabits, not like the environment as an outside. Um, and yeah, so I'm hoping that this sort of progression and this growth that I've just shown you over the last 8 or 9 years in my career, I can share that with you, and how I've done that, and how I've made that, and how satisfying this work has become, and kind of add how rug hooking and stitching has added to my experience as an artist and just made me stronger. So those are some of the things that I'll be talking about going forward. But now, hopefully, by seeing this work, it puts it into a little more context. So thanks again for being a member, and yeah, spread the word. Thanks.